Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us in another webicon brought to you by Cardinal Santos Medical Center. My name is Lucky Diaz Tiozon, and I will be your moderator for today's session. In the past weeks, the Philippines has seen a steady decrease in COVID-19 cases, lower positivity rates, lower utilization of COVID beds in our hospitals, and there are more than 89 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines already deployed. NCR has achieved more than 80% vaccination rate, and through our government's efforts with the Bayanihan Bakunahan efforts, at least 7.6 million jabs have been implemented in just 3 days this week. More than 36 million Filipinos have been fully inoculated against COVID-19. Yet, just as we are all looking forward to hopefully a better and less socially distant Christmas season, we are now facing the threat of a new variant of concern named Omicron. Several countries have already detected this latest VOC, including our neighboring countries of Hong Kong, Japan, and South Korea. The Philippines has no confirmed Omicron case to date yet, but experts believe that Omicron entering our shores is no longer a question of if, but of when. Amidst this new threat and the clamor for a risk and science-based approach and response that balances the needs of our society, are we ready to do our share in safeguarding everyone's health and well-being? In today's session, we will hear from fellows of the OCTA Research Group, an independent and interdisciplinary research team composed primarily of academics who sought to monitor the pandemic using models and projections. No less than Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship and Go Negosyo founder, Mr. Joey Concepcion, will serve as reactor, sharing his views and insights from the economic front lines with lessons learned and practical ways in which the public and the private sectors can come together to mitigate the threat of Omicron. After the talk of our speakers, we will spend some time for the open forum and entertain questions from our media partners and from the rest of our Zoom Webicon audience. Just a few reminders for this Webicon. First, may I remind all panelists to put your microphones on mute until it is your turn to speak. For the open forum, please type your questions using the Q&A function of Zoom. And finally, after the session, please take time to give us your feedback by logging on to www.menti.com using the code 38902002. You may also access the evaluation form, which will be redirected to you after the session. Our first speaker is currently an assistant professor at the Department of Political Science from the University of the Philippines in Diliman. His subject expertise are in political science, including Philippine government and politics, Philippine national and local administration, and other special topics. His commitment to serve our countrymen paved the way for him to do consulting work at the local and national government levels, and he continues to do research and advocacy work in a number of areas, including education reform, freedom of information, and ICT for development. Let's now call on our first speaker, Professor Ranjit Singh Rai. Prof. Ranjit?
Yeah. Good morning to everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank our sponsors for today, Raul Pagdanganan and the Cardinal Santos Medical Center family, who have been hosting our Webicon since the start of the year. And we'd also like to thank PA Joey Concepcion, who has been our partner with Go Negosyo, always very supportive of the research work being undertaken by the OCTA Research. And of course, we'd like to thank all of you who are here today, our media friends, our fellow Filipinos who are just really interested trying to understand the state of COVID-19 in the country. So I'll make my conversation with all of you extremely short. I have only 3 points. Okay. Number one, the basic position of OCTA Research, its basic outlook for December is positive and optimistic. And we repeat this, it's positive and optimistic. And it's really based on the very good data and trends that we have been trying to discuss over the last month or so and monitoring over the last month or so. And much of this will be discussed by Professor Guido David. No, and what do the trends basically say? Okay, that the COVID-19 is in decline, not just in the National Capital Region, but in our country. In fact, today, I'm happy to note, and Lucky already showed this in her presentation, new cases in all regions have gone down, and not just gone down, but gone down in double digits. No, the positivity rate at its is at all-time low. No, as far as the National Capital Region is concerned, and for the country, it's at 2%, and this is quite low. When you look at our hospitals in the National Capital Region, the COVID wards are, have less patients, and hospitals are operating at a normal capacity. And this is the basis for OCTA's basic outlook, not just for today, but for for most of the December, which is one that is positive and optimistic. Second, key message is, while Omicron, this new variant of concern, is something all of us have to focus on. Okay, while it is a variant of concern, OCTA believes it should not be it should not be a cause for panic. At the moment, the situation for the country and the National Capital Region is positive, and we feel the trends will continue to go down. Okay, we also believe that much is still needed, no, for us to know the real threat of Omicron, and this discussion will be provided by Father Nick and Dr. Mike T in subsequent presentations. I believe, no, and this is the belief also of OCTA Research, that while the Omicron is a variant of concern and that it should not be a cause for panic at the moment, okay, we should instead focus, okay, on what the best science is telling us that works. And that is, of course, vaccination and vaccines, the continued practice, no, of minimum public health standards, the wearing of face masks, okay, social distancing, hygiene, avoiding crowded places, and of course at the national level, testing, tracing, and isolation, as well as increasing surveillance, no, at our borders and tightening our border controls. The best science is telling us this works, no. And now more than ever, we are better prepared because of our experience with the past surges, and most especially the Delta, that when Omicron comes in, it will not see us, it will see us a more prepared nation to deal with it. Okay. The most important thing that has to be emphasized is that vaccination is moving forward. A significant number of our countrymen have already been vaccinated. And in the last 3 days, more than 7 million of our countrymen have been vaccinated. If we continue vax to the max, I believe we'll be better prepared for Omicron if it does come in. Last message is that for us, no, as individuals, as citizens, no, to continue to be vigilant and to continue to, be safe. Okay, while we must and we will enjoy a Merry Christmas this year, it's important for us to do so in a safe manner, and that's why we encourage our citizens to continue considering vaccination if they're not yet vaccinated. And for those of us who have been vaccinated and are over 6 months, to consider having themselves boosted. The worst thing that can happen now for us is to be overconfident against the virus, okay, and underestimate it. So again, these three messages OCTA wants to emphasize to the public and to the media. Number one, as far as OCTA Research is concerned, the December outlook is optimistic and positive. Yes, let's stick to the what the best science is telling us will save us, no, from corona. Okay, especially the Omicron variant, which is to have ourselves vaccinated and exercise and practice minimum public health standards. Okay, and to in this time of Christmas, no, to continue to be vigilant and safe. So with that, I end my discussion and invite my colleagues to present their research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ranjit, for providing the right context as we tackle today's topic. Speaking of data and projections, our next speaker is a scientist and a doctor on his outstanding research in computational biomechanics, an interdisciplinary area that utilizes mathematical modeling and computational methods to solve relevant medical and biological problems. He is passionate about teaching, and he facilitates undergraduate and graduate level courses in applied mathematics at the University of the Philippines. His outstanding works in the field has led him to become one of the 10 outstanding young scientists in 2010. To give us the latest COVID-19 situation and projections, we now give the floor to Dr. Guido David. Dr. Guido?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Lucky, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for inviting me to RRCP and all our friends from Cardinal Santos, media friends, and of course, Go Negosyo, headed by Presidential Advisor Joey Concepcion. So I'd just like to give a situationer and a rough outlook of what and I'd just like to share this. So a rough outlook of what we might be expecting in the coming weeks. Right, so looking at the number of cases in the country, we can see that it has basically, really dropped. The 7-day average is now down to about 500 cases per day, 551 cases per day. And this is actually lower compared to last year, and I will show that in a while. As far as the NCR is concerned, we're down to about 138 cases per day. I mean, that used to be the 7-day average, even for a small local government like, even some local government like San Juan during the peak of the surge. But now San Juan's averaging less than 2 cases per day only, which I didn't show here. But I want to basically compare our numbers to last year. And we can see that the 7-day average, as mentioned, 500, might have been a typo, 551. But last year it was at 1,635. And that was a fairly low number already last year. We plateaued at around that number. And that was equivalent to a daily attack rate of 1.49. But now our daily attack rate is less than 1, which already qualifies as very low risk. We can see the reproduction number is much lower now. The number of active cases is also lower. And in fact, there's a star here because we feel that it could be lower once some of the older backlog is cleared up. The positivity rate is, of course, lower. We're testing about the same as last year. The only number that's a little higher is the number of ICU beds occupied. And this is because of the recent surge due to the Delta variant, which caused more severe infections in ICU cases. In the NCR, it's very similar. Last year, we were averaging about 400 cases per day with a daily attack rate of close to 3. Now, our daily attack rate is less than 1 again, and our positivity rate is 1.2%. It has never been better. Again, similar to the situation across the country, the number of ICU beds is the only metric that is slightly higher compared to last year, again, due to the severity of the Delta variant. But if you look at all the metrics of the NCR, I'm happy to report that NCR, according to our metric, is classified as very low risk, very low reproduction number, very low ADAR, very low hospital utilization, very low positivity rate. So very low, again, without the threat of, possible threat of the Omicron variant, we may have very well moved to alert level 1. But as PA Joey Concepcion, well, he mentioned that, we decided to remain at alert level 2. So across the world, this is what we're seeing. Actually highlighted some countries where the surge now is actually the worst that they have seen. So for example, in Belgium, cases are increasing. In Germany also, they're averaging now, 60,000 cases per day. Also South Korea, a surprise, relatively lower compared to these other European countries, but the surge now is worse than it was in the past. Vietnam had a surge around the same time as we did. They were containing it, but the surge, well, it basically resurged. Hopefully they'll be able to contain this soon. And of course, I use a different graph here because we are hearing about South Africa, but relatively the number of cases, well, this is per million of people. So they're averaging about 3,000 cases now. And most of it is due to the Omicron. So I just want to cover a few facts about or at least preliminary information about the Omicron before Father will expound on this. So far, what we have heard or read is that there have been more than 200 cases detected in 24 countries. Preliminary data shows that it appears to be spreading faster than the dominant variant, which is Delta. And now the Omicron is already considered a dominant variant, dominant variant in South Africa. The good news is that data shows that vaccinated people are only showing mild symptoms at worst, and that transmissibility may be less or lower for vaccinated people, in the sense that if someone is vaccinated and there's a breakthrough infection, there's a chance that the transmission rate or that or the rate of spread of the virus from the vaccinated person will be lower because of, well, the effects of the vaccine. So just to give us an idea of the threat of a surge, if we use a ballpark number of 10 for the reproduction number of the Omicron, it may be higher, it may be lower. So again, we don't have complete information yet. Generally, if we use minimum public health standards like face mask, this will reduce the reproduction number. Our estimate is it's about 50%. Now with 80% fully vaccinated people in the NCR, that will essentially reduce the reproduction number down to 1 from 5. So what that would mean is that there will be, at least based on this data, I'm not saying this is what will happen, but the threat of a surge is not that high, or if there will be a surge, it may not be the kind of surge that we have seen in the past due to the Delta or even the Alpha and Beta. So it may be a relatively light surge. So again, we still do not have enough data. What we have shows that it's more transmissible, but vaccinations may help reduce transmissibility, that vaccines are effective in reducing the severity of the infection. Preliminary analysis that I just showed shows that the threat is relatively lower. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen, and also that we may recalibrate this outlook or these projections once we have more information. But this is again based on preliminary information that the worst case will be a light surge. However, provinces with lower vaccine coverage may be vulnerable to surges and lockdowns. So what I'm basically saying here is that the threat of another, lockdown in the NCR is much lower, based on this preliminary information. So Thank you. I'll be happy to address questions later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guido David. What we gathered from your talk and also of Professor Ranjit's earlier is that, there are a lot of things that we can be grateful about, no? The lower cases that we're experiencing in the entire Philippines. And while we do not know much about the Omicron variant, the things we do know and the things we've been used to doing, minimum public health standards, vaccination, we know that they will still work and that they will really mitigate the threat of potential Omicron surge. So thank you, Dr. Guido. We will hear more from you during the open forum at the latter part of today's session. Our next speaker currently serves as Professor of Biology and Theology at Providence College in Providence, Rhode Island. He is also a visiting professor of biological sciences at the University of Santo Tomas. His paper on modeling of COVID-19 was just recognized as an outstanding scientific paper of 2021 by the National Academy of Science and Technology of the Philippines. He is passionate in the fields of science, philosophy, and theology, allowing his works to be published in several research bodies. His first book, Biomedicine and Beatitude, An Introduction to Catholic Bioethics, was published by the Catholic University of America Press in 2011. Proving that the fields of science and theology can coexist, it was recognized as a 2012 Choice Outstanding Academic Title by the Association of College and Research Libraries. To talk about the Omicron variant and the efficacy of our vaccines against it, we welcome Father Nicanor Austriaco. Father Nick, welcome.
Good evening, good morning from the United States. I'd like to share my screen, please. Thank you. So thank you so much for inviting us on OCTA to present today. I'd just like to make a comment on Professor Guido David's presentation. I don't know if you really appreciate the significance of the low numbers we are experiencing today. Keep in mind, a year ago, we had not seen Alpha, we had not seen Beta, we had not seen Delta, and we could not lower the numbers below 1,000 cases per day. Now, after these incredibly transmissible variants, we are down to several hundred per day in the entire country. There are more cases in my home state of Rhode Island than the entire country of the Philippines. My home state has 1 million people, and we have several hundred cases every single day. There are more cases in this my one state than the entire country of 113 million people, number one. Number two, this tells you something. This is the fruit, unfortunately, fortunately, of the many waves we've had in the past. If you remember, Professor Guido David pointed out Vietnam, South Korea. These are countries that are experiencing difficulties with the Delta variant because they never experienced the Alpha and Beta surges. And so what you're seeing now is not only do we have significant vaccination, population immunity from vaccinations, but we also know that we have significant natural immunity from the previous waves, which is why the virus, even the Delta variant, the most devastating variant, is struggling to spread any further in the country. And we are thankful to God for that. So let me now talk about the Omicron variant. So I begin with the best animation we have of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. This is an animation put together by an international team of structural biologists. And what you can see is that the skin of the virus is studded with 25 or so spike proteins. And these spike proteins are the keys that the virus uses to enter our cells. Now, there were 4 important variants of concern of SARS-CoV-2, Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta. And of course, now we have Omicron with 50 plus mutations. And so what I would like you to do is to introduce you to this variant. Now, the most important thing to remember for those of you who are not biologists is that different variants have different spike proteins. That's pretty much what distinguishes one variant from another. There are other mutations, but the most important ones are the spike protein mutations. And so this is a comparison of the spike protein on the left of Delta and Omicron. And the redder it is, the more changes you see. And hopefully you see that Delta on the left, there's a few red spots, but now Omicron on the right is very red. And this is why biologists are concerned, because so many changes have happened to Omicron's spike protein that we are worried that the vaccines that we developed against the spike protein are not as effective. So this is this summarizes the concerns of biologists. So if we'll begin with the spike protein, so there are 32 mutations in the spike protein. And if you remember, if you know, Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Gamaleya, all of these vaccines injected spike proteins into people. And so if the spike protein has changed so much, then the spike protein of the Omicron variant will be able to pass by the defense of the human body. Not only that, we have two mutations in the nucleocapsid protein called the N protein. And so this will allow the virus to make more copies of itself faster, which would make it more infectious. And then finally, we have mutations in the membrane protein that scientists believe will allow the virus to enter cells better and to make it more infectious. So now you see, this is why in theory and in principle, scientists are deeply concerned about this variant. Now, this is the data just from yesterday from South Africa. And Professor David showed you the spike in cases, but I think it's important to compare it to the other spikes. So in red, so on the left-hand side, you have the daily cases, and Professor David already showed you the spike, the surge in the Omicron wave. But now we are going to overlap it with the wave, the previous waves that hit South Africa. You have the original Wuhan wave. This is the first wave. The beta wave, you notice, was just as high as the first Wuhan wave. And then, of course, you have the Delta wave, which we are just recovering from. Now, notice several points. The Omicron wave is increasing at a substantially faster rate than Delta. What this suggests is that it is more transmissible, which is why when people say it looks like it's more transmissible, this is the data they're pointing to. The middle graph shows you the positivity rate. And again, what you can see is the Omicron variant has radically increased at a rate faster than Delta, Beta, and the original Wuhan strain. And so this suggests, both of these two on the left suggest that what we're seeing is a more transmissible variant of COVID-19. But the right graph is a graph of incredible hope, because you see, if you look at the hospital admissions for Omicron, the hospital admissions look like all of the other variants. So if this is the case, then in what we're seeing here is that a lot of people are getting sick and it's spreading quite rapidly, but many of the cases are mild. Now, the challenge and the limitation to interpreting this data is that the average age of the 200 or so positive cases in South Africa is about 30 years old. And we know that the worst cases appear when our lolos and our lolas get infected with COVID-19, which is why we cannot yet really know how acute this particular variant is until we wait a few more weeks. Now, in terms of the spread, so the United States announced that it now has 3 cases, 1 case from someone who traveled from South Africa, but just today, there were 2 cases that are thought to be local transmission from an anime convention in New York City a week ago, a case in Minnesota. And you can see it spreading. Most of them are still detected in travelers. A lot of people are worried about Hong Kong. I'm not worried about Hong Kong. Hong Kong has one of the strictest quarantine protocols anywhere in the world, 21 days in a hotel, basically nothing is going to make it through that. So if they find it, it's not in community transmission, it's not going to spread. But many of these other countries are probably already, if they have not yet already, are going to report very soon local transmission. So what are the important questions that we need to ask? Is the Omicron variant more transmissible? As I've shown you, the initial data suggests that it is. Is it more immune evasive? There is anecdotal data that you have more breakthrough infections, and actually not breakthrough, reinfections of people who previously had COVID-19. So we believe there is a higher proportion of individuals who had natural immunity against COVID-19. We are going, in the next 2 weeks, what is being done is that the virus is being exposed to blood that has been taken from vaccinated people to see whether or not the blood is able to stop the virus from growing and from replicating. And so what you will see here is we will know within 2 weeks if it is more immune evasive. And then, of course, we have to see if it is more deadly. Will it send more people to the hospital? As I pointed out, the limited data from South Africa suggests that it is not more deadly than Delta. The caveat is that many, if not most, of the Omicron patients in South Africa are relatively young. We will have to wait to see how it will impact the lolos and lolas of the world. Now, what can we do? And I'm just going to echo my friends and my colleagues in OCTA. We have to prepare as we prepared before. The infrastructure, and as we've seen in the Alpha and Beta and Delta surges, it is the staffing capacity of our ICU beds and our COVID beds. We need more nurses. We have to continue to vaccinate and boost our kababayans as fast as possible. And we have to especially focus on increasing population immunity around our international gateways. So the NCR has significant population protection, nearly 100% of all the adults and half of our teenagers are now vaccinated. This will hopefully provide a wall around the Ninoy Aquino International Airport so that people who arrive at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, even if they carry it, it will be hard to penetrate the population. The same thing must be done around Clark and around Cebu. I understand that Metro Cebu has been able to attain significant levels of population immunity. The province of Cebu is lagging. And then I would like to end by pointing out that one of the things that the Philippines should do is to procure antiviral drugs. And these drugs will decouple cases and hospitalization. So let me point out that the advantage of drugs is they're equally effective against all variants of SARS-CoV-2. So it doesn't matter what variant you have, the drugs will be able to prevent that. And let me show you what the drugs do. So when a SARS-CoV-2 virus attacks a human cell, it will enter the cell and it will inject its RNA into the cell. And that RNA has to make more copies of itself and it has to make new virus. And the two drugs, Paxol from Pfizer and from Molnupiravir from Merck, prevent that from happening. So this is Paxlovid. This is the most recent data. So I am especially excited of the Pfizer drugs. So the Pfizer drug, the efficacy is that it's 89% effective at preventing high-risk patients from going to the hospital. So they stay at home. They have 5 days of drugs, 2 per day, so 10 pills, and 0% of them died. And 89% of them were prevented from going to the hospital. You can imagine how incredibly powerful that would be in the NCR, how powerful that would be in our largest cities. Because now our lolos and lolas who get COVID, we will give them 10 pills. They will take it 2 per day and they will not enter the hospital. And so our hospitals will not be overwhelmed, right? So these are currently they're seeking emergency use authorization. The Molnupiravir has just been approved in the United States, the Paxlovid, which is really the game changer. If you look at the numbers, That is also being sent to the FDA of the United States. In terms of the cost, this is the cost in the US, right? $700 for molnupiravir and Paxlovid, $500. So it's still substantial with regards to the Philippines, but hopefully for developing countries in the global south, they will be willing to give us a discount. But if we're able to obtain this for the Philippines, it would really be a game changer. I know we have molnupiravir, so we can start with that, but let's try to get Paxlovid as well. So thank you very much. I'm willing to answer questions. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Father Nick. There are 2 points I'd like to highlight from your talk. You mentioned about this fear of Hong Kong getting its or detecting its Omicron variant in their shores. But I think the fear is really coming from it's the Christmas season, and a lot of our kababayans who are OFWs in Hong Kong are probably thinking of coming home to the Philippines as well. I guess that's where that fear is coming from. And second would be, you mentioned about the reinfections, right? I guess the question that we all ask is, what role do vaccines play in protecting us against infection, reinfection, and breakthroughs, especially with this new Omicron variant? So those are interesting questions we will be asking you and the rest of our panelists later in our open forum, Father Nick. So thank you. Our next speaker is a professor and a scientist and a vice chancellor of UP Manila. He is a fellow of the Philippine College of Physicians and the Philippine Rheumatology Association. His research interests include the development of biosimilar monoclonal antibody against rheumatoid arthritis and vaccine as treatment for systemic lupus erythematosus. In response to the effects of this pandemic in our lives, he published several papers on the mental health impact of COVID and the use of saliva to detect SARS-CoV-2. Sharing his insights on prevention, protection, and management against the new variant, we now call on OCTA Research Fellow, Dr. Michael T. Dr. Michael T.
Yes, thank you. Thank you and good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the President and the CEO of Cardinal Santos Medical Center for inviting us here, UP Regent Raul Pagdanganan. The question posed today is, how do you solve a problem like Corona? The questions, and many of these questions have been answered, is how transmissible? Father Nick said it's faster. Does Omicron cause more severe disease? It might be milder. Might be because it's too early to see the full course of the disease among those who are infected. How well can Omicron evade the COVID-19 vaccines? Possible. That's why it is called a variant concern. And these vaccines that were used are those with spikes with noted mutation in the Omicron variant. How do the existing COVID-19 treatments hold up against Omicron data? There's limited data, but as shown by Father Nick, it will prove to still be effective because the mechanism for all variants are the same. The question will be the monoclonal antibodies that are used, because from what I know, Ronapreve was for the up to the Delta variant. So there will going to be a lot of tests that will be happening in the next few weeks to evaluate treatments for Omicron. Now, the Interagency Task Force, as mandated, has issued several guidance, and these are in effect as of today. It follows the 4-door strategy of the Department of Health. And the first door is, of course, implementing travel restrictions and bans as a separate and primary level of defense to supplement the current implemented health protocol. The difference now is that fully vaccinated individuals have to arrive here with a negative RT-PCR test conducted within 72 hours prior to leaving their country of origin. They will undergo facility-based quarantine for up to 5th day if they have the RT-PCR test taken on the 5th day and proves to be negative. And there will be home quarantine up to 14th day from arrival. That is door 1 strategy. And then there is also a difference now in the alert level. The CLACE classification, or total COVID-19 bed utilization, increases to moderate risk or higher, will now move us up from level 1 to level 2, and level 2 to level 3 when we already have bed utilization at a moderate risk, or if classification is at high or critical risk. Now, those are important changes, but let us look what is happening on the ground. This is from the Philippine Red Cross COVID-19 Hospital Operation Center report. It shows us that there are only 8,864 patients admitted out of the total 36,896 beds in the whole country. This is about 1/4, only 1/4. Now, in the National Capital Region, it's even lower. The hospital utilization rate is even lower at only 2,500 out of the available 10,000 hospital beds. So as of this time, the main question in the mind of our people would be, how will our Christmas be? It appears that with this kind of healthcare utilization density, there is a very little chance that we will have a moderate to high level utilization. But again, that is because our country never removed the mask mandate. The question I was seeing in the chat is, how can we be sure that if there is already surge in the European countries and in the Americans, how can we be sure that the entry of Omicron will not cause a surge? First, the first door was closed. So our Department of Health and the IATF, they were preemptive in this decision making. Number two, in our country, people are still using masks. And I have seen the effort, especially when you listen to the radio, watch television, you will hear our leaders talk about keep on wearing masks, especially if you are in close areas. And we are still advocating the going to places where there are better ventilation rather than in closed settings. Even in our hospital, there is in university, there's already guidelines on the conduct of Christmas party. And we encourage it to be online rather than face-to-face because we want to avoid transmission. Add to that is the, and finally adding to that is the high National Capital Region vaccination rate. I would say that the strategy before of NCR +8, which we push, and I can really see that there is very high National Capital Region vaccination rate, is going to somehow dampen the effect of COVID-19 Omicron variant in our country. What's important now is what Senate President Soto commented as published in the news. Let's conduct a full-blown research on Omicron variant because we don't want to be accused of nagtatakutan tayo ng wala sa lugar. And to do this, we need to improve genetic surveillance. We need to have better epidemiologic analysis and look at the national vaccine effectiveness data. Because up to now, if you look at the COVID-19 case bulletin, it is still of the same nature as it was before vaccination was introduced in our country. Look at this. Total ng aktibong kaso, total ng gumaling, which we expect to be going to increase as the number of cases also increases. And then mga bagong gumaling, bilang ng namatay. But nowhere here can you find the differentiation between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. Add to that is what we observed, and we issued this report 5 days ago about this total ng aktibong kaso to be including still some cases from 2020, January to June 2021, and then October. So you see, if this active case, it will still be maybe accounted for if it's maybe up to 2 months. But after 2 months, the patient would have either resolved and recovered, or something happened to that patient. And in our analysis, about 48% reduction is expected from these active cases if we remove the number of patients who are still recorded as active when they have already should have been recorded as either recovered or something else from 2020 to September 2021. And then finally, this is maybe our suggestion on how to better analyze, how to prepare. Because as Regent Pagdanganan has been advising me in terms of planning for the university, we need data. And as someone who knows number, Regent Pagdanganan is very keen on numbers and how to use them for planning. We need to know who gets infected. How do vaccinated patients fare against those who are not vaccinated? Therefore, in our daily report, we should report the number of infected, differentiate those vaccinated from the unvaccinated. And then in the number of those hospitalized, mild and asymptomatic, we should also count how many of those hospitalized were vaccinated. So we will know the vaccine efficacy when we compare them to the hospitalized unvaccinated. Do we have a sample of this? Yes. In a small municipality in Camarines, we analyzed that, Tigaon, with Mayor Chiqui Fuentebella as my source. She gave me these numbers. In her municipality, 478 patients were infected, of which 11.5% were vaccinated and 88.55% were unvaccinated. In the vaccinated, 95% were mild, while 3 were hospitalized, or 5.5%, no one died, as opposed to the 11.8% hospitalized unvaccinated. And this is twice as likely to be hospitalized if you're unvaccinated, with 7.1% chance of dying. But this is already a composite number, meaning you don't differentiate those who are young, old, with comorbidity and no comorbidity. But from that, we already know that among those who are unvaccinated, their chance of dying, their chance of being hospitalized is higher than those who are vaccinated. And if our problem in improving vaccine acceptance and removing vaccine hesitancy is the opinion of a lot of people that this is still a research, pinag-aaralan pa yung bakuna, which I heard in radio this morning in one of the very popular radio stations. Someone was being interviewed and she was saying, pinag-aaralan pa lang yan eh. Probably if we can show them real world data, in rheumatology, when we talk about in patients who receive monoclonal antibodies and special drugs, we talk about real world evidence. This is as real world evidence as it can be. And showing this to our people will probably boost their belief that yes, vaccination works and vaccination is our way out. Especially now that we are already exploring the chance of a face-to-face piloting, face-to-face classes in our university and even in the elementary and high school as announced by the Department of Education. So that's an important research, as the Senate President was saying we need to do this full-blown research, not just for Omicron, but for the whole COVID-19 response. And with that, I'd like to end that we are still into the prevention, detection, isolation, treating, reintegrate, as well as strengthening health and critical capacity. What we are seeing now are hospitals transforming their COVID beds into the regular beds so it can respond to cases, to elective cases that have been neglected prior. But we also encourage them to be agile, to have that agility to retransform by ensuring that health human resources as well as equipment are available so that when surge happens, we can have these necessary beds properly manned and able to treat patients with COVID-19. So that is how we will supposed to solve a problem like Corona. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael D. I think it's important to reinforce what you mentioned, that in our approaches, in our policy decision making, it's best really to take a data-driven approach. But I'd also like to suggest that we should also reinforce the efforts of the government, maybe through the private sector and the media who's also present today, to be able to share this data-driven thinking also with the majority of our kababayans and Filipino people, because we're also live on Facebook, and some of the questions we've been receiving are to that effect. So one of our listeners mentioned, kung di kaya ng vaccine ang Omicron, ano pa po ang silbi ng vaccine? Baka mas effective pa po ata ang ivermectin. No? So, mahalaga talagang tignan natin yung mga datos, no, para hindi din po pasupusog po yung mga decision. And I hope that this can be shared to more people in our country. Okay, so thank you, Dr. T. Join us later for the open forum. I'm sure our audience now have a lot of questions. Now, at this point, we also have invited a very special guest who will react to the points highlighted by our speakers and share his insights on ways we can move forward together as we mitigate this latest threat. Our guest is at the helm of several organizations, currently serving as president and chief executive of listed food and beverage company RFM Corporation. He is also a director of Concepcion Industrial, a conglomerate with interests in appliances, property, insurance, and cargo handling services. He is President Duterte's advisor on entrepreneurship and chairman of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council Philippines. He established Go Negosyo, which provides livelihood opportunities and mentorship to small entrepreneurs. As he champions projects aligned with his advocacy of service, he was recently given the Padma Shri Award by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This award is India's equivalent of the Nobel Prize given to achievers who serve the poor. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome PA Joey Concepcion. Sir?
Good morning. First of all, I'd like to greet our partners from OCTA Research. We have been at this for quite some time. Now, I'm sure everybody is worried with Omicron, the private sector, and of course, OCTA has been at it for quite some time. We're basically 21 months since this pandemic has started. The question is, what do we do now? Do we panic, or do we continue with the strategies that we have laid in place? First of all, can the Philippines continue to do all of these lockdowns? Even as we do granular lockdowns, which is much better, the more lockdowns you have, you create a lot of disruption in the economy. Can the Philippine economy take it? If you look at the debt to GDP of the Philippines, from 2018 at 37%, debt to GDP basically from an entrepreneur standpoint is, when I invest my money in my business, I expect growth. But if growth does not happen, then I have to borrow money, okay, and to fund my operations. So the more I invest either to equity or borrowings, that means more inflow. I'm putting more debt into my balance sheet. But if I don't get the growth expected, then of course the percentage goes higher. And you can see in the year 2018, 2019, we were way below 40%, 37%, 36% debt to GDP. As we entered 2020, of course, that was the start of the pandemic. You saw a negative 9.5% growth. And of course, all of these vaccines and all the other equipments and whatever that the government is buying, they're spending trillions of pesos in really funding all of these vaccines. And it's not going to be something that's one time. As you see, we have been doing this for 21 months, and now you've got Omicron, so that will continue. It will be part of what we will have to manage through the process. So can we afford more lockdowns? The answer is definitely not. And what will happen here is that in the year 2022, the projected debt to GDP is at 62%. In the year 2021, we were already at 59%. Of course, we should be lower than 60%. So we will cross that point whereby it becomes critical. Not only that the economy and the country or the balance sheet of this government cannot afford it, our micro entrepreneurs are getting severely affected. While digitalization is enabling many of them to help pivot, but still you can see a lot of these people are running out of funds because you cannot run a business with a closed open type of economy. So we have shifted basically to a very clear strategy over the couple of months. The first was what OCTA Research and Go Negosyo, together with the rest of the private sector, not everybody in the private sector agreed to it, but to me, the August 8th decision to do an early lockdown was the turning point. The objective was to save the fourth quarter. People are telling me, chamba lang yan, kaya bumaba ang case, siguro namamatay si Delta ng sarili. What a ridiculous thing. And of course, these anti-vax people are saying, oh, ivermectin is the reason why the cases are going down. Well, that's really idiotic thinking if you ask me. No, and that's why we have vaccine hesitancy in the far-flung areas like Visayas and Mindanao and the rest of Luzon, is because there is some of these people who come out in radio, who come out and say the wrong things, no, and it increases the level of vaccine hesitancy, which is not the right thing for this country at this point in time. The formula is still the same. There is nothing different to what we should be doing. A, we should not panic. Number two, let's try to understand Omicron more as we start to close down everything. I've talked to IATF, and this our quarantine that was moved down to 3 days is back to 5 days. Well, it's fine. No? I understand that's okay, because we want to see greater clarity first on Omicron in the next 2 weeks, as Father Nick mentioned. Now, do we now panic? Do we move back to alert level 3? From the numbers that I see, we can move really to alert level 1, even as we see today. The numbers of 500 cases in a national level has never been seen in a long time. NCR at 100 plus cases, and more so vaccine rates are moving up, especially in NCR. So clearly, the way I see it, the strategy implemented of focusing in NCR did work. It was proof that given a few vaccines arriving this year, we had to focus on one area, which was NCR. So now that we see NCR at very low levels of infection, and again, let me say, it is correct what you call this, of the people are saying, our friends are saying, is that we should classify of those being infected, how many of them are vaccinated and unvaccinated. That is a big difference. That data has to be produced by DOH. We have to find out, as people get infected, were they vaccinated or unvaccinated? Because if it is the vaccinated who get infected, we know that these cases will be most probably mild and will not require hospitalization. So they should not factor in the burden of hospitalizations moving up. No? So then we will not panic and say, wow, well, we see now 1,000 cases, but what if them are all vaccinated? Why worry? We should not panic, because chances are they will be mild. So that kind of thinking has to be in place. So A, we can't afford to do these massive lockdowns anymore. That's out of the question, because this country will have a bigger problem. We will sink as a country, definitely. So we can't adopt that same view. So we have to vaccinate to the max. We have launched our dashboard that you see in all the newspapers every week. All newspapers carry the percentage of each region, how many percent vaccinated, the different cities, and we're now looking at putting municipalities. That dashboard, the objective of which is like what we had in the old quick count of during martial law days, where we were guarding the ballots. We wanted everybody to see in great transparency what is happening out there. Who of our governors, mayors, and barangay captains are doing an excellent job. Prior to this, we did not launch the dashboard because we felt that there was a lack of supply. But now that there is a lot of supply on hand and arriving, this is why we want and launch the dashboard, to give every citizen greater clarity on how many percent in your area are fully vaccinated, and with the number of these vaccines being deployed. So it will motivate people, and it will shout out those who are lagging behind and that they have to catch up, because the solution here is vaccinating 90% of the entire country. To my mind, initially it was 70%. We knew the word breakthroughs. Now with Omicron, there will be more breakthroughs. So that number has to move higher, not at 70%, now at 80, hopefully we push it to 90%, what NCR has achieved. And that's why Secretary Galvez and Duque and Vince Dizon are pounding it out right now, making sure that the LGUs implement, because this is where the difference will be. Now, the question is, our citizens, those who don't want to take the vaccine, should they be given more mobility or less mobility? And I'm glad that IATF came out whereby on-site workers who don't want to be vaccinated, fine, provided you have to take an RT-PCR test every 2 weeks, which means that is going to cost you about 3,500 pesos per RT-PCR test. Maybe it can go down to 2,700 depending where you go. But that will cost the employee about 60,000 pesos annually, to my estimate, not to be paid by the private sector because we already bought the vaccines, but to be paid by the employee, assuming that he has no medical condition that will prevent him from being vaccinated. And of course, the mothers who are pregnant in the first trimester cannot take these vaccines. No? So with those exceptions are fine. Now, this kind of push by ITF is important. Is it discriminatory? No way is it discriminatory because we're after the common good. It's either we die of the virus, COVID-19, or the economy dies. It's worse. Both sides are bad. And what will save that is purely vaccination, of course, and wearing a face mask. Those are important, and the proper health protocols, social distancing. But critical to this is vaccination acceptance moving much higher and giving greater mobility. And that's why the quarantine, which was moved down to 3 days, is back to 5 days because of this issue. So the point being, what I'm trying to stress is, aside from on-site workers having to take this mandatory PCR test at their cost, will push more of these on-site workers to take the vaccines, and especially those that are running restaurants, spas, salons, gyms, etc. Their clients are only fully vaccinated clients. So how can you have an employee there who's unvaccinated serving and vaccinated clients? And that is part of the policy that we agreed with IATF to secure that these places which are higher risk, because it is indoor dining, not outdoor. Outdoor is a different story. You can be unvaccinated and stay there. So granting greater mobility to the vaccinated has to happen even at a greater level. To me, even allowing vaccinated entry to tourist destinations and not allowing unvaccinated entry to this tourism should be done. No? And eventually, LGUs may select that since they have achieved 90% fully vaccinated, they may come to a point that say that only those who are fully vaccinated can enter my LGU. It can come to that point if what we see moving forward is situations like what is happening right now with Omicron. So the private sector will continue moving and pushing for alert level 2. While we can move to alert level 1, from consulting with a number of businesses, sectors, they feel that alert level 2 would be the most prudent at this point in time. And maybe when the Omicron threat is well determined as to the level of breakthroughs and whether it can vaccines can protect us from severe illness and hospitalization, then we can take a more aggressive stand. So alert level 2 is what the private sector will be fine with during this period of uncertainty, because of Omicron. And I think many entrepreneurs are still doing well, especially with higher capacities right now. You can see more people going out, consumer spending picking up, election spending is there. So many businesses and business owners are quite happy now. So the question is, can we sustain it till the year 2022? That is the goal. Sustaining this, that is more important really than achieving alert level 1. Sustaining this open economy, which not only each entrepreneur, especially micro entrepreneurs, need, but the national government cannot afford to see growth rates go down as they continue to borrow money to fund all our health requirements. So OCTA Research is our partner. They are providing us that visibility. They did provide us that visibility on August 8th, and I'm glad that we made that call. There was one or two business organizations who really went after me and said, we did the most stupid thing to do. And now, who looks stupid? We've done the right thing. You've seen these cases come down, and the private sector will open the economy safely. We will not act irresponsibly. We are after a safe opening of the economy. And now that we have basically better visibility with OCTA as acting as advisors to us, hopefully we'll be able to read out these numbers. And looking at the numbers that they present today, it clearly shows that we are on safe grounds at this point in time. Omicron is a threat, definitely. But I believe that even with higher breakthroughs, what is more important for me is that these vaccines, I believe, will still protect us from severe infection and hospitalization. I am praying that my own assumption is that these vaccines will still continue to give us that protection. And if it does, then the game plan does not change at all. It doesn't change. It is the same. Continue to vax to the max the entire Philippines, targeting 90%. Keep the economy at alert level 2. Eventually, bring back the quarantine for overseas balikbayans coming home back to 3 days from the current 5 days as was switched just recently. Let's continue to save lives and livelihoods. And I'm more confident that we have now a very clear strategy. Moving forward, we are now looking at bringing booster shots for the year 2022. AstraZeneca has secured the booster shots for this first semester. We have purchased that. We have enough booster shots for the first semester. What we're looking at is purchasing already, because I was told by Secretary Galvez, the private sector will only be allowed to bring in under a tripartite agreement AstraZeneca. They've decided to bring Pfizer, Moderna, Sinovac, and other vaccines under the government program. But since the private sector was first to bring in AstraZeneca under the tripartite agreement, Secretary Galvez has agreed to continue with that arrangement. So we are now in talks with AstraZeneca to bring the booster shots for the second semester of next year. We have secured the first sem of AstraZeneca's already. That's here and coming in next year. What we are planning for is the second sem, which might have the new generation boosters already for the second sem. AstraZeneca has committed to us to give it to us at still a very good price, and they will not require any down payment anymore, unlike previously. So we believe that we have to secure these boosters because it will move towards boosters every 6 months. No, that's the way I look at it. We have to also secure enough vaccines for our children as they go to school, the 12 to 17. And eventually, as the vaccines are approved for the 5 to 11, that should be the next. So right now, I've talked to Secretary Duque that no need, the boosters that the private sector will be deploying are for those who took Sinovac early this year. But for AstraZeneca and Moderna, these vaccines, the second dose for AstraZeneca was given in September and October. And for Moderna, bulk of the deliveries just started to happen in July. So we will need these boosters really next year towards February to April, May, that period. And those vaccines somehow have been secured already because with the delay in the vaccines towards this coming December, which I'm glad to some extent there was a delay because now these vaccines can be used for the children 12 to 17, especially in the case of Moderna. And it's a very effective booster as well, no, to blend with AstraZeneca. So AstraZeneca and Moderna both can be used as boosters, and we will have that supply for definitely for the first half of next year. And we will secure the Astra boosters this early on for the second half of next year, because that is the only vaccines the private sector will be allowed. So I am confident that we have a clear plan in place being executed as we speak. No changes in these plans are needed. Let's not just panic, and let's pray that all of what we are doing will result in good results eventually. Thank you.
Thank you very much, PA Joey Concepcion. So just to reiterate, we have to sustain the wins that we have gained from our preparation and from our actions in previous months and in previous surges. The recommendation of Go Negosyo, the private sector, also in coordination and consultation with the OCTA Research Group, is for the government and IATF to maintain alert level 2 and really to support vax to the max, not only from the national government's efforts, but down to the LGUs, and may I say, even down to the barangay levels and the family level, because that's where each one of us can also make a lot of difference. And finally, you made some strong points there regarding allowing greater mobility and lesser restrictions between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And I'm sure there will be a lot of questions on that in our open forum. So thank you very much, sir. I now invite all of our speakers to put their cameras on. I'm sure with the roster of our speakers and panelists and the wealth of insights and learning shared, there are a lot of questions and clarifications. So we are now opening the floor to some of your questions, starting with this question for Dr. Guido David. Assuming the Philippines is at 70% herd immunity nationwide by the first quarter of 2022, how much further risk reduction would we see if we get the third booster for those already vaccinated? Dr. Guido?
Yeah, well, for the boosters, I might have to invite some of our medical experts regarding that, because as far as the data is concerned, it's not really clear, on what the actual value is in terms of the risk reduction when we have boosters. What we do know is that, vaccine efficacy, or at least the antibody levels due to vaccination reduces over time, and there's a 6-month period when the level of antibodies reduce, and we assume that this is related with the reduced efficacy of the vaccines. But what we can say is that if we increase vaccinations, this will definitely reduce the risk of another surge. And in fact, because of our preliminary calculations in the NCR show that with the 70 to 80% vaccination rate in the NCR, I personally believe that the threat of another surge is very, the threat is not that high. And even if we have an increase in cases, it will not be as bad as what we experienced with the Delta or the Alpha and the Beta, where we had 5,000 cases in the NCR. We might have a spike. We're not very concerned about that right now. Again, this is preliminary data, so things can change. But I don't even think we will get to about 1,000 cases in the NCR, for example, because of the vaccinations.
Thank you, Dr. Guido. Father Nick, would you like to add to that?
Well, so Professor Guido is correct that this is a very complicated question because the risk depends upon the particular vaccine, the particular age group, and the particular the time period between the booster shot and the second shot. However, the data from Israel does demonstrate, and this is specifically for Pfizer because Israel pretty much has a monopoly on Pfizer, is that without the booster shot, significant numbers of their lolos and lolas were becoming hospitalized. And once they were able to be boosted, within 2 weeks, you can see a radical, radical decrease, dramatic decrease in hospitalizations of the lolos and lolas. So I think it's most important to emphasize that the lolos and lolas and those with comorbidities must get boosted because they are at highest risk. Those who are healthier, it is advisable only because we want to maximize the population immunity in the capital, and not only in the capital but everywhere in the country. And this, of course, will depend upon the supply And as we all know, the country has an excess right now of vaccines. They have expiration dates, so we should all get vaccinated.
Lucky,
Lucky, I think you're
Sorry,
muted.
sorry. Thank
Yeah.
you, Father Nick. This question is for any of our OCTA fellows. There are some reports spreading online that Omicron is not as potent or as dangerous as other variants, and that the concern regarding this variant is misplaced. How and why should this be refuted,
So
if at
let me
all?
respond to that. So the reason why people are saying that, because the preliminary data from the doctors in South Africa suggests that a significant numbers of the Omicron patients have mild disease. But as anyone who studies this knows, since the average age of most of those patients is 30, you do not expect for any variant to have high hospitalization rates for this age group. So it is hopeful, but again, it is very important that we do not provide false hope. We have to wait. It will be about 1 or 2 weeks before we have a clearer picture on the clinical profile of this variant. So we are hopeful, we are praying. We are 22 days from Christmas, and I think that honestly, the chances of a surge happening between now and Christmas is very small. So I think we can be assured of a relatively healthy, relatively pandemic new normal Christmas. If there is going to be a surge, it will probably not be this month. It will probably in the first quarter. And even there, as Dr. Guido Davide pointed out, we have such significant population immunity, at least in the urban areas, that it's hard for me to see a repeat of the kind of surges we have had so far. And that, of course, that is hopeful. We will pray for that.
While we have you, Father Nick, this question I think is also for you. The Omicron variant is yet another variant of COVID-19 virus. Why are there so many variants popping up, and should we expect a new one again soon? And how do we stop this?
So every patient who is COVID positive will make his or her own variant. So every patient has a variant, but it's very difficult for that variant to escape that patient and to spread. Now, one of the things that's hopeful is that Delta appeared in March, diba? So Delta appeared in March. So it has been many months already. So remember, there was Kappa, Lambda, Mu. No one cared about those. So all those variants appeared, but they fizzled out. They disappeared. So it's actually good news that it's taking longer to get a significant variant of concern like we have with Omicron. The gap between alpha and then beta and then delta was a lot smaller than what we're getting between delta and Omicron. So this tells you that, number one, vaccinating the world has decreased the chances of generating a variant. However, as you can also see, this variant is really the first variant that evolved in a vaccinated or partially vaccinated population, which is why it has so many mutations. Now, people are saying it might have appeared in an immunocompromised patient. That's true, but we've had immunocompromised patients the entire pandemic. So what's so striking about this is that this one is now appearing at a time when we've been vaccinating for a year. So we have to get used to variants. Okay, variants will come. We have variants of flu all the time. But after a while, especially with these drugs, with the high vaccination rates, in time, it will become relatively mild. Now, mild not in that you will not get sick, but mild in that the impact on our society will be mild. We will not have hospitalizations and death.
Thank you, Father Nick. This question is for Dr. Michael T. Are there any safety data of these two new drugs? I think the drugs that were mentioned by Father Nick a while ago. If a COVID patient has comorbidities like HFPM and ASCVD. Dr. T?
Yes, thank you, Lucky, and to the one who asked the question. The trials specifically for these drugs that are supposed to prevent severe disease, are conducted among patients who have such a comorbidity. Now, we actually choose patients who have this comorbidity so that we will prevent their hospitalization. So if you ask, are there safety? In fact, they are the kind of patients you want to treat. Patients who have diabetes, patients who have heart failure, patients who have renal problem, as long as the glomerular filtration rate is not less than 30, because these are the patients who will get hospitalized, who will die because of COVID-19. So the answer to that is it is safe. And you have to trust the doctors who will give you that to match the patients who are in the clinical trial to those patients who will actually receive in real world this molnupiravir. And that is in the inclusion exclusion criteria of the move out trial for your information. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. T. This question is probably for PA Joey Concepcion and any of our OCTA fellows. The presidential advisor has been pushing for the opening of the country for returning OFWs from North America in time for Christmas. That's Father Nick. But now with
2
the
weeks
threat,
from now.
but now with the threat of Omicron and there are confirmed cases in the US, how likely will the IATF close borders for those coming from the US? That's the first question. And would OCTA recommend to ban travelers from North America?
Hey, Joey, maybe
Yeah.
would like. Yeah.
Well, I just talked to Doc Ed Salbani, and asked him. We have been at we were able to get it down to basically 3-day quarantine, but now it's back to 5 days. And Doc Edsel said that they just want to be careful during this period. Once more data comes out on Omicron, and if it looks like that it's not as bad as what some people think it is, then they can bring it back to 3 days. No, I think that's fine. That prudency on the part of the IETF. It is something that is not permanent. In fact, Secretary Berna still has her request that was approved, where we are going to allow foreign nationals to come to the Philippines, no, from America and all over, to boost the tourism sector. No, that has also been placed on hold till better clarity on Omicron comes out.
Any?
Lucky, I'd just like to
Yes.
add to PA Joey. The OCTA Research supports the government's position on revising quarantine protocols, and the idea there is while the situation is good for the country, while we understand and realize that Omicron is a variant of concern, it should not cause panic. No, we want to keep the economy as open as it can be, okay? But then we agree with government, with PA Joey and the private sector that complacency should have no place in our current strategy, that we should continue to be vigilant and learn as much as we can about Omicron and recalibrate. So the next few weeks should be, in the minds of everyone, not just that we're going to have a very good Christmas this year compared to last, no, but that we should continue to be safe, vigilant, and be open, no, to changes, as we understand and we know more about Omicron. But again, we reiterate, OCTA's basic position is that the outlook for December is positive, and that the country is in a very good situation at the moment. And that third, we all have a role to play to sustain these very good trends, because as we all understand, trends change. No, they're not permanent. Yeah, and whether Omicron is here or not, these trends could change for the worse if we become complacent, we become overconfident, and we do not do what the best science is telling us to do, which is to vaccinate ourselves, to vax to the max, and of course to practice the minimum public health standards. Remember, in many of the countries where there's a resurgence, we're not certain if it's being driven by Omicron. For the most part, it's being driven by the current dominant Delta strain. And in many of these places, a lot of people do not anymore practice the minimum public health standards, like wearing of masks. Fortunately for the Philippines, we continue to have a mask mandate, and that if we just simply practice wearing the mask going out of the house, we will protect ourselves even from the newest variants such as Omicron. So again, the question, and we'd like to reiterate and support the position of PA Joey, that the goal now is to sustain. And to sustain, we need to do our share, practice minimum public health standards, and of course, to vaccinate. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
So
Ranjit.
Lucky, I like to say something too, right?
Go
So
ahead.
I'm scheduled to arrive in the Philippines on the 19th of December, and I now have to extend my hotel for 5 days. Now, I'm also in contact with many Filipinos and balikbayans who are planning to fly home. And I will be honest with you, they are disappointed, but they're completely supportive of the extension, because everyone hears about Omicron and we want to protect our country.
Yeah.
So they will still fly back. There's disappointment because it's expensive and it's two less days from Lola. But I'm on these Facebook chat pages and I know people personally, and we're like, if this is what the country needs, we will do it, and we will do it, and I will do it 5 days, even Christmas Day, because now it includes Christmas Day. I will have to spend in the hotel. So, but we have to do what we have to do for our people.
Thank you for sharing that, Father Nick. But the good thing is we will see you this Christmas. Your family will be with you this Christmas. Thank you. This question is for Dr. Guido David. Assuming that the Omicron variant will enter the borders of the Philippines this month, how soon is a surge expected to take place?
Yeah, so of course, it depends on the level of the surge. But even if the Omicron variant was to enter now and started spreading, I mean, based on our projections, that by late January, we would still be at around 5,000 cases per day in the whole country, not in the NCR. So I mean, and that's kind of like a fairly, I won't say a worst case scenario, but it's a relatively pessimistic scenario considering. So, it might happen like that, but the best case scenario is we won't even have a surge as bad as that. But in terms of the timeline, I would say that it would happen around late January to February, when it starts to increase, when the number of cases start to increase. But again, these are just preliminary information. We may recalibrate. The threat may be totally, totally be negligible, or it may be worse than what we're thinking. So we'll have to wait and see for, I guess, a few more weeks.
Thank you, Dr. David. For verification, can the standard RT-PCR test and antigen test still detect all kinds of variants? Maybe Dr. Michael T. or Father Nick. Go ahead, Father Nick.
Yes.
Okay, my colleague will respond first.
Go
The
ahead,
fact
Doctor.
that it was detected means that the PCR is working. We have the PCR here, we have Sansure, we have Biorad, and the antigen can also detect that. There is no data that shows that it cannot be detected. Remember, these patients were initially detected using RT-PCR, and it is a sample that was submitted for surveillance. So for genomic surveillance, so that they were able to identify mutations and identify that as a new variant coming from a positive RT-PCR. So Father Nick, go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to add that one of the benefits of the Omicron is that certain PCR kits can actually detect the Omicron, right? So, and OCTA has been talking about this to try to encourage the use of these kits that have the capacity to detect what is called an S gene dropout, because it takes a long time to sequence the genome. But there is a very quick test that a standard PCR test can actually detect Omicron. And so it is hopeful that if we implement this test in our quarantine procedures, that you could actually identify a traveler who's arriving without genome sequencing pa. We can already identify a high-risk Omicron before that person leaves quarantine. Because in the past we would have you would send them home, you would you would do some sequencing, and you didn't realize it was Delta. So now there's a possibility we can actually identify Omicron sooner. That might help in terms of our border protection. And Dr. T is much more knowledgeable than me with regarding to the PCR capacity, since he has worked for many, many months with the Red Cross in the Philippines in this regard.
Thank you, Dr. D and Father Nick. This question is for any of our fellows. Should the country implement a no vaccine, no entry policy in establishments like malls, especially for toddlers and infants? They usually enter malls without masks. What if they might be the ones who will bring the virus into their families? Professor Ranjit, would you like to answer that?
OCTA has not taken a position on this issue, and our basic consensus is mandating, forcing people to get vaccinated is not a policy we support. Encouraging, incentivizing vaccination is a position that OCTA has always been supportive of. And so maybe with regard to this very draconian position where we have no position on this, and my sense is, based on our own group's consensus in the past, that it might not be necessary to do so. So mandating, forcing people to get vaccinated, maybe something as a last effort. No? We still believe, no? When you look at our latest Tugon ng Masa survey, nationwide survey last September, 22% of the adult population are hesitant to be vaccinated. And they're hesitant for two basic reasons. They're not informed about they're uncertain about the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. A very small percentage of those who are hesitant because of misinformation that the vaccine can kill and all of these things. So when you look at the big picture, majority of Filipinos are willing to get vaccinated. More than 60% actually are willing to get vaccinated. But there is a segment of the population. While it's a minority, it's important to know that getting as many people vaccinated will help us prevail against the corona. And 22% is still 22%. It's a significant minority. And our belief in OCTA is mandating will be a problem. Okay, but informing, incentivizing vaccination could be the way forward. Many of our kababayans who are hesitant are in classes D and E, and many of them are not informed and need just to be informed about the safety and efficacy of vaccines to so that they will get themselves vaccinated. The hardcore, based on our surveys, is around 9%, meaning these are the people who believe that vaccines are not needed to cure COVID-19. 9%. So it's a small number, but it remains to be a minority. But it's a solid minority. No, it's always been 9% since we started, something between 9 and 10%. But most of our kababayans who will be informed, will be convinced that vaccines are the way forward, that vaccines save lives, and vaccines are effective against the coronavirus. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Ranjit. Pero siguro yung mga batang-bata, yung mga 2 years old, 1 year old, baka pwedeng sa bahay na lang din muna, no? Wag dalhin sa mga matataong lugar, no?
Yes, we have said that we support that position. In fact, we support the position of the President Duterte, that for our own kababayans to consider, no, to be more cautious as far as bringing children to, for example, close areas like malls, no. Yeah. And if they have to do so because they have no one to leave them to, leave children in the house, no, that they should wear the adequate protective equipment. So yeah.
Thank you. This is for Dr. Michael T. What are your thoughts on face shield? It will make a comeback allegedly once Omicron appears in the Philippines, and months ago we are the only country who's wearing face mask and face shield outdoors. Are you also open to the prospect of people wearing double masks instead?
I think the WHO chief has already spoken about the need to shift to, or the need to just continue wearing masks rather than add face shield again. He mentioned about the high social resistance to its use and Really, right now, it's been how many days since we not use face shield? But I will continue to say that we need face shield in medical facilities, especially since physicians and healthcare workers will be dealing with patients who might need to remove masks as we examine them. So that's a special population and special situation. But for the general public, especially in the outdoors, I think a face mask properly worn and with the proper observance of distancing should be sufficient. Thank you. I will have to leave, Lucky. I need to see a
Yes, thank
patient.
you. Thank
Thank
you, Dr.
you.
Michael T.
Thank
See
you
you
to all our
soon.
audience
Stay
and
safe.
to Regent Raul Pagdanganan for inviting us here. Thank you, sir. Magandang
Thank
umaga.
you. Thank you, Dr. D. This question is from Robert Bob Reyes. Sorry, nawala siya. Wait lang. I'll look for it. Yeah. And it's for PA Joey Concepcion. For Go Negosyo, many business owners and consumers feel that the implementation of the safety seal has become a ningas kogon type of thing. As a presidential advisor, how should we weigh things between safely reopening the economy and penalizing those who fail to follow the established protocols? PA Joey?
Lucky, Mina sent a text message on chat that PA Joey had to leave for another interview. So
Okay.
he's no longer in the room.
Okay. Anyone would like to weigh in on this question?
Lucky, it's important that we all do our part, no, in trying to sustain the downward trend that we're seeing, and the private sector plays an incredibly important role in this. As we open the economy, as mobility increases, it's normal to expect that there'll be an uptick in cases, and the private sector can help by making sure that they can monitor and enforce minimum public health standards in their premises, no, and that's where the safety seal comes in. The safety seal is just really a standard, no, a minimum standard, but it's up to the proprietors, entrepreneurs, owners of the businesses to be a little more strict, no, with regards to minimum public health standards, and I think we encourage, no, and we exhort actually our kababayans, our who go to restaurants and malls to inform mall owners and administrators, restaurant owners, now if they feel that the standards are not being met, no, and we also exhort our business owners to follow the established government standards, no, for opening business at this time. Yes, we are at level 2, but that doesn't mean we should be complacent. That doesn't mean we should not take aside the rules and regulations as far as opening up is concerned. COVID is still here. It's still contagious. It's still a killer for some of us. Okay, and for us to be able to sustain the opening of the economy, we have to practice minimum public health and enforce minimum public health standards. So I think this is a big a call, an exhortation to our business owners. We understand that livelihoods are important, but we believe we can keep the economy open if we sustain certain types of practices, such as the monitoring and enforcement of minimum public health standards.
Okay, last two questions for the panel. I think this is for Father Nick. For those people who got infected via breakthrough before getting the booster shot, will they still need to get booster shots? I heard after the breakthrough infection, they will automatically develop natural immunity.
So I will answer it in two ways. Biologically, the questioner is correct. So biologically, an infection, a natural infection, will act as a booster. However, politically, it's not necessarily the same. We're seeing this in the United States. You're seeing this in Europe. So Europe has basically, the European Union has now recently proposed that all international travelers entering Europe have to receive a booster shot. So what this means is some countries may allow you to carry a letter from your doctor verifying that you were infected with a breakthrough infection. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is that given the complexities of travel rules at the moment, the easiest thing is to get a booster shot, right? So I had one of my former students got COVID. I said, you wait 2 months and then you get the booster shot, because that stamp on your vaccine card just makes your life so much easier now.
I heard this from a lot of people, especially since in the hospital, we've already started inoculating our frontliners with booster shots. And we were given the option to choose between Sinovac, since majority of us were inoculated with the Sinovac vaccine, and Pfizer, right? And so when we asked those people vaccinated for Sinovac, which vaccine they will choose, majority said Pfizer because they
Correct.
plan to go abroad. So I guess the question, maybe other than the efficacy or whether that's really the better choice, is it true that there are still countries that do not accept people who are vaccinated with Sinovac, for example?
I believe I can speak for the United States. The United States is accepting all WHO approved vaccines. It's not clear to me if that's the case in Europe. I have Dominican brothers who had to go to Rome. They were vaccinated with Sinovac. As soon as they arrived in Rome, Italy required them to be vaccinated again with AstraZeneca or Pfizer or Moderna. So with regards to the booster, there's a question, we can mix and match now. So there are people who took Sinovac and they can take Pfizer and Moderna, and those will substantially boost. But you see, there are people who will still take Sinovac, and you'll say, why is that? Well, that's because they're young and they're male. And the risk for myocarditis is 0 for Sinovac, but there is some risk with the mRNA vaccine. So if you are a 27-year-old man and you were vaccinated with Sinovac and Sinovac, you might as well get a third Sinovac. There's no risk for you for myocarditis, and your efficacy will go up to the low 80s, maybe not 90s, but you are young and healthy, and the risk for you getting severe COVID is already very negligible. So you see, I just wanted to highlight that there are reasons why people are saying, well, I must get Pfizer or Moderna. That's not the case. This is something that you and your doctor, you and someone else can have a conversation about.
Thank you, Father Nick. Any last words about what our kababayans can do this Christmas season with the threat of Omicron variant, and as they safely celebrate Christmas with their family, especially those coming from abroad? Any tips or reminders? Let's start with Father Nick, then we'll go to Dr. Guido.
Well, first of all, celebrate.
Yeah.
We have much to be thankful this year. Compared to last year, the Philippines this is the best shape that the Philippines has been since before the first wave, really. And we are great. And what it is very different now, as Professor Guido pointed out, we have substantial immunity. Our hospitals are much better equipped. Our nursing staff, and we thank them for their sacrifice. The healthcare workers are much more experienced. They know how to deal with COVID-19. We are at the best place right now in the 20 months. And Filipinos, this is our favorite time, and so we should celebrate. That's the first thing. We must celebrate, and we thank God for all of the great gifts. Now, at the same time, we have to be careful. So we try to do our parties outside. If Lolo and Lola are there, we're not going to try to bring everybody in the office to meet Lolo and Lola. You know what I mean? We're trying to shield them somewhat. But we do, but we should go to church. People are saying, should we go to church? Yes, you should go to church. Should we sing? Yes, you should sing. Maybe even without masks outside, as long as it's outside and you're socially distanced, you can sing. And if everyone is vaccinated. So we are grateful. We have to enjoy, but we are also careful and prudent, right? And we don't do things that are unnecessarily risky because COVID is still there.
You just made it a Merry Christmas for a lot of our kababayans, Father Nick. Thank you. Let's hear it from Dr. Guido.
Yeah, I echo the messaging of our fellow OCTA Research fellows, especially what Father Nick says. I believe we will have a Merry Christmas. Even with the worst case scenario, it's not going to affect our December holidays. It may be late January before it happens, but that's the worst case scenario. I'm actually very hopeful and very optimistic this time. At this time last year, we actually were having good numbers, around less than 2,000 cases per day. But the main difference is that there was still a high level of uncertainty last year. We were not sure what to expect, even us. I mean, we were thinking there would be another wave or another surge, and there were variants, coming out all over the world. The alpha and beta were came out late last year. So there was a level of uncertainty, and it was also a level of uncertainty because we didn't have vaccines yet. So it's like, we couldn't be very confident because we didn't have protection. But now we have vaccines. Cases are dropping to very low levels. We're going to have a good Christmas. I really think we're going to have a good 2022. Of course, we have to be circumspect as still. We still have to practice minimum public health standards and still be careful. But even if we have a spike in cases due to the Omicron, I don't think it will be as bad as what we had in the past because of the vaccinations, because of our experience and our exposure. So I think I don't think we will have lockdowns anymore. Even next year, even if the Omicron comes, we'll be able to manage it. So I'm very, very hopeful. So let's stay very positive. I mean, not COVID positive, but let's keep our positive mentality for Christmas and for next year. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, Dr. Guido. Finally, we'll hear it from Prof. Ranjit.
Okay, so just to echo what my fellow OCTA researchers are saying, let's keep ourselves positive, but let's maintain being negative from COVID, no? And the reality is, trends are very good for the country. I agree with Father Nick and Professor Guido, but trends can change, no? And us being mindful of that, we have to realize that what we do as individuals now during this period is more important than any government intervention as far as dealing with COVID is concerned. As long as we realize that we wear masks, we follow the minimum public health standards, social distancing, proper hygiene, avoiding crowds, no, we will be able to contribute to sustaining the positive trends. The outlook of OCTA is clear. It's optimistic. It's positive for the month of December. We are going to have, a Merry Christmas this year, merrier possibly than last year. Okay, but again, while we must and we will celebrate Christmas, we have to be mindful that of our important roles in sustaining the downward trend. We have to be mindful that our biggest enemy, apart from Omicron and COVID, is really complacency, is really overconfidence, is really irresponsible behavior. If we're mindful of all of that, I don't see any problem over the next few weeks, no? And that we even feel that the numbers will continue to go down, even with so much mobility. So with that, we'd like to thank Cardinal Santos, the Cardinal Santos family, RCP, PA Joey, Concepcion and Go Negosyo, and of course all our, all of those who attended today for giving us an opportunity to share our research findings. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. With that, we formally conclude this morning's Webicon, which would not have been possible without the collaboration of our partner organizations, OCTA Research and Go Negosyo. So Prof. Ranjit, Father Nick, Dr. Michael P., Dr. Guido, and to our special guest, Presidential Advisor Joey Concepcion, thank you so much for sharing your time, expertise, and insights. We hope that we were able to enlighten and motivate everyone in preparing for the Omicron variant with a whole of society approach, emphasizing the role that each of us must play in our communities and even in our own families for humanity to truly and finally prevail against COVID-19. So how do we solve a problem like Corona? With blood, sweat, tears, and everyone on board. Vaccines work. Please get vaccinated. Build a habit of following minimum health and safety standards, even as we celebrate the holidays with our families. You have a role to play, so please don't be a bystander in this fight. Let us know your Webicon experience by logging on to www.menti.com, inputting code 3890-2002 to evaluate this session and to let us know your suggestions and recommendations. You may also access the evaluation, which will be emailed to you shortly. Once again, this has been Lucky Diaz Tiozon, your moderator. Thank you, everyone, and please keep safe.
I just wanna hold you. I just wanna look into your eyes.